Welcome to a new Euranet Plus pre-election debate. I'm Hermine Dancel, and I am going to debate today climate change in the next European election with two guests from the European Parliament, Mr. Peter Liese from Centre-Right European People's Party and Mr. Florent Marcellesi from the Greens. Thanks for joining us. To discuss how and what climate topics are going to influence the climate change debate, we'll have questions from our radio members, Euranet Plus Network, starting with Olivier Henrion from Belgian media RTBF.
For the last 6 weeks, thousands of young Belgians have been massively marching for climate in different cities around the country. So what kind of commitment would you propose to answer their requests for concrete changes in our climate policy?
Mr. Marcellesi, would you like to start on this one?
Well, let's say first that I fully share the demonstrations of the youth in the streets of Belgium, of Germany, of Holland and Sweden also, and that's a win of hope, because I think that we lack ambition right now, and they just recall us that we need to have some more ambition. For example, what we voted in the European Parliament on the clean energy package, that's a good step forward, but we are not still in the pathway of the Paris Agreement. So what we need right now in the different states, what we need on the local level too, that's a clear ambition to say that we will stick to the Paris Agreement, because that's about our future. And I think now, as politics, we have to deliver. We have to deliver, seeing what they said. And because we have a climate emergency, that's quite clear. Climate emergency, that means that we need to be very on the top of the ambitions, and that's what the youth is waiting for us right now.
Mr. Liese, would you say that intergenerational justice is strong enough? And, when we see all these young people complaining about our inaction at the EU level?
No, I think the young people definitely, they have a point, and I like their engagement. It's important as a fact as such that young people are more engaged in politics now. I would prefer that this action take place after school, because there's always a suspicion that some of them just don't want to go to the lessons. I don't think it's true, but the suspicion is, of course, obvious. Some colleagues in my party, they have a problem with that, so their credibility would increase if they do it after school, but they have a point, and I think they need to make it strong. And my biggest concern is that this movement needs to be sustainable, because you cannot improve climate policy all over Europe and all over the world with 3 or 4 times going to the street and alerting. It needs to be a long-term engagement. And that's why in my town there is such a movement, a small town, but more than 100 people are going to the demonstration every week. So I invite them and try to make a long-term policy out of this. And the most important point, in my view, that we have to deliver now, we have to start before the election and then implement after the election, is that Europe really needs to be climate neutral by 2050. I was surprised that my political group, we have some colleagues that are not as convinced that climate mitigation policy is important than I am, but my group supports this line, and I think we need to push to the member states now that we really need to be climate neutral, and that we need to have a concrete plan how to achieve it, also without losing jobs and with still having economic growth.
Ms. Annika Hedberg from the European Policy Centre actually thinks that, well, it's good to have a long-term plan, but the problem is that often policymakers think in a silo. Let's listen to her.
If we are serious about achieving sustainable prosperity, which delivers societal, economic and environmental benefits, one really needs to look at the big picture, and that one needs to find a way to carry out a transition that brings all these different benefits to the people on the ground.
Mr. Marcellesi, is it so that we only look at one dimension at the policy level very often?
Well, the problem is that in most cases, first, we don't respect the agreements that we voted. I think that's the case for the Paris Agreement, because we are not in the pathway, as I said before. And the second thing is because, for example, that's a very sectorial way of seeing things. One example, if you want to be in line with the Paris Agreement, well, the Paris Agreement should apply to all policies that we have in the European Union. That we have to be coherent, transversal. And that's not the case, for example, when we vote for an agreement as the CETA. Well, well. My question is, really, do we care about climate change? Because as we know, CETA, for example, means that we're going to raise the emissions. But I think that all the trade agreement that we are doing right now, for example, all the economic policy, commercial policy, has to be in line with the Paris Agreement and with the Sustainable Goal Development. So I think the main word in that is we have to be coherent, and the Paris Agreement should be on the top of that. And I think that's what the youth is telling us. Please put the Paris Agreement, put climate on the top of the priority. And I think that's something that they did, and that we have to say that for the elections, climate is the priority. That's not about identity. That's not about migration that other parties want to put on that. No, that's about climate. That's about the real future. I think the main challenge that we have right now is climate change, and that's time to try to deliver on that.
Mr. Liese, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's not fair to do European politics bashing for the European Commission, and I also think we in the European Parliament, we have a coherent approach. When you look at the papers presented by the European Commission, also the legislative proposals, we are covering every sector, and climate change is now in all policies. It's in the financial policy, and Canada is a very important ally in this world of Donald Trump, and that's why it is important to show that we work also on an international level, and to have an agreement with Canada is a value as such. And of course, we are talking with Canada not only about trade, but also about climate. I think we made a lot of progress in the last years. We need to do more, that's for sure, but we need also to take care that those people that are negatively affected by some of our measures, like, for example, the coal miners, or people that driving old diesel cars, they cannot afford a new car, at least not in the short term, that we need to take them into account. Because we want to be a leader in the world, we want a good example. If the example is that we are doing good at climate change but losing jobs, then nobody will follow us. That's why I think we need a coherent policy. I agree that climate change is a big priority. Our Chairman Manfred Weber even said it's probably the most important challenges of our political generation. That's true, but we need to do it in an intelligent way.
You've mentioned diesel cars, and actually this is taking us to Spain, where we have a question from Diego Villacorta from Es Radio Castilla y León.
Hello, I would like to know what will happen with some fuels like diesel or gasoline for the next few years. The European Union explained in one of their latest reports that our taxes in Spain on energy showed little income, which reflects the low level of excise taxes on unleaded gasoline and diesel. In Spain, in this country, we will not have budgets for this year. In fact, one of the measures that will be cancelled is the bonus to users whose vehicles run on diesel. My question is, what policies should be promoted regarding electric and conventional transport in the coming years?
So, Mr. Marcellesi, if I may, what will happen to diesel car users in Spain?
Well, I think that we have to be quite sincere with that and honest. I think that diesel is over. And we have to do it on a way very clear, making the ecological transition a just transition. So as we know that diesel is over, as we know that we have jobs depending on diesel and people having some cars, diesel cars, what we have to do is a just transition. That means a transition addressed to the people that need it more. So at the same time, ecological transition, diesel is over. If we go into renewables, electrification, for example, car sharing, public transport, bikes, people walking, that's the future that we want. That means a climate-friendly one. And at the same time, we have to put some measures giving the money that we will have with the diesel car to the people that the most needed that. For example, that's an example that we have from the yellow vest. The yellow vest is a very good or bad example of if you do bad your job, for example, putting ecological transition without just transition, well, you will have some problems. So what you have to do is to take all the money that you have with ecological tax, for example, and put it in the just transitions. That's it for the coal miners, for example, because coal is over, and that's the same thing for diesel. And that's I wanted to finish saying that in Spain, for example, that's where we don't have any budget, and that's a shame and a pity. But at the same time, we have something very important. For example, in the Balearic Islands, they said that the new climate change law will forbid all the diesel car for 2040, and including including before, if that's possible. So that's the way that we are to go. No diesel car and the money for the people that need it, because ecological transition and just transition are two faces of the same coin.
Mr. Liese, would you agree to that?
I think the market and the technology needs to decide if diesel is over. We can do it clean concerning NOx and particulate matter, but it has to be done, and also the industry needs to do better in this regard. And then the technology needs to decide. There are engineers that claim that you can make the combustion engine 50% more efficient. If this is possible, then we can use diesel cars or gasoline cars for some time before we go to zero emission cars like hydrogen or electric vehicles. Electric vehicles, I think, are a part of the solution, but there are, of course, concerns that it can't be the only solution. So we need to decide the market and the right policy we are just about to adopt. We have agreed on a 37.5% reduction for cars. That has been heavily criticized by the industry, mainly by the German industry. I think it's a shame. They should do their job and not criticize this figure, because it is realistic. It has at the same time been criticized by the Greens as being not ambitious enough. I think it's a fair compromise. And just tonight, we agreed with the Green rapporteur on a 30% target for heavy-duty vehicles, so the lorries. This is the right policy, and this will focus the market in the right direction. And we have to take care of those people that are, at the moment, it has not so much to do with the climate change, but more with the NOx emissions, that drive an old diesel car and now see that the value is lower and they have an economic problem. I think there we need to take care also of these people and not just see the target and don't care about how it affects the average people.
We have a last question from Germany this time, from Claudia Knopke from AMS Radio.
Hello, everybody. And I would like to travel a bit back in time. About 30 years ago, I was in China and I read in a newspaper, why are the Germans so green? I can't remember the answer, but when it comes to the green Germany today, somehow it feels like the intensity of the bright green is somehow fading. And in Germany, mostly the Greens are complaining that the government is too hesitating, too slow when it comes to real action against the climate change. So my question is, are we losing our green ambitions, or who and what is slowing us down in Germany?
Mr. Liese, is Germany still driving the climate change transition?
It was difficult in the last few years. Emissions has not gone down in Germany. And one of the reasons is that we decided to phase out nuclear. And you can always theoretically claim that it's possible to phase out coal and nuclear at the same time, but in practice, it is making the case more difficult. And then we had this problem with the European ETS, that the carbon price was very low. This is fixed now. The carbon price is higher, and Germany decided to phase out coal. So I think we are back on track. We did mistakes in the last years, and also in Germany, many people, they didn't believe in the ETS. They didn't invest in the improvement of the ETS. Fortunately, we convinced these people, and now we are back on track. I'm very optimistic that Germany will deliver on the 2030 targets and learn from the mistakes that has been made in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Mr. Yes,
no,
would you agree?
I'm very agree on that, saying that Germany is back on track, because when I see the polls, for example, with the Greens as a second force, I think that we can say that. But that's true that we are still
down at the moment.
Well, going down 70%, I think that's going down very relatively. Going back on track, I think that's because of the Greens. That's quite clear. But at the same time, why Germany was not on the good track on the last year, for example, most of all because we see that the German government, led by Merkel, gave too much gifts to the car lobby, for example, to the lorry lobby. And that was one of the debates that we have this tonight in the new directive. And that's quite clear that if you want to make a good climate and energy-friendly policy, you need to say to the lobbies and to car lobbies that they have to change. We have to change because climate change is not against the industry. That's an opportunity. And I think that we have to think that way. And that's what the youth are saying in the street. Yeah, that's true that we have to change the system. Yeah, that's quite right. But the system, when we will change, that will be a lot of jobs, much more jobs in the green sector than in the brown sector. And we all know that. United Nations, European Commission, all the scientific say the same thing. So that's time to be, I think, a bit more strong in that way, and to say to Merkel, including that if she wants to be more on track now and not to be or have to agree, the Greens, the first policy for force in a few years, well, I think she has to see that the climate change is an opportunity.
So yes, we all hope for a climate change transition that brings competition. I mean, that maintains competition and keeps us competitive in the global markets. I think that will be our final word today. Thanks again for joining this debate, and thanks for watching Euranet Plus.